Welcome to the American Mind. Peter Wood is with Michael Toscano, the author of a tour de force study of higher education in America, recently published electronically by the National Association of Scholars, of which Peter is the president. The study is called "What Does Bowden Teach? How a Contemporary Liberal Arts College Shapes Students." And so I guess, Peter, the first question is, why Bowden?
Bowden pretty much volunteered. The president of Bowden College, a man named Barry Mills, gave a commencement speech, a convocation speech in the fall of 2010, in which he professed that almost everything was right with Bowden College, but there were a few things that troubled him, problems that he didn't know how to solve. One of those was that he recognized that Bowden's faculty were overwhelmingly on the left. They were a liberal faculty, that this bothered the public, and that he would welcome more intellectual diversity at the college, but he didn't know how to attain it. In effect,
what provoked that admission from him? I mean, it's not at all unusual for presidents to claim that their institution, their college, is perfect. Why dwell on this one blemish that he saw?
Well, he saw it as a marketing problem for the college, that there were grandparents and parents who would look upon Bowden as a place to which they would not want to send their children because they feared the children would be getting a one-sided education. Now, in elaborating this point, he sought for examples as to why the college couldn't just go out and create a more diverse faculty. And the first example that came to mind for him was a golf game that he had recently played with Tom Klingenstein. He didn't mention Mr. Klingenstein by name, but he mentioned a New York businessman. And according to the account that he gave, he played it for laughs with the audience. He'd been having a great golf game. He was just keeping his score amazingly low. And he was in the middle of his backswing on one of the holes. And
Who won the game?
I believe that Mills won the game.
Presidents of colleges get a lot of time on the links, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he does get a lot of practice. His account of what happened was that this rude, boorish businessman interrupted his backswing and blurted out something like, "I hate diversity." And from there, things went downhill. The businessman repeatedly interrupted his swing and in a offensive manner went on to explain that he wouldn't give money to a college like Bowden that was so interested in admitting the wrong kinds of students, which seemed like a pretty veiled accusation of racism. He picked probably the wrong person to make the butt of his anecdote. He published this speech. Tom Klingenstein recognized himself as the putative
Boor,
and responded in the pages of the Claremont Review of Books with his own golf story. And
yes, the winter-spring issue of 2010-11, which was our 10th anniversary issue, incidentally, but continue.
Tom Klingenstein is the chairman of the Claremont Institute and a man who is fairly sophisticated, adroit, a playwright, an intellectual, someone who was not to be accounted as a golf bore, among other things, and who had the presence of mind to come back with a rather adroit account of what actually happened on the golf course, but picks up this thread that Mills had created. If you want a college that has more intellectual diversity, let's take a look at your curriculum. And he cited the history department, which has some oddities to it. There was one course on World War II titled Rosie the Riveter. It was titled Women on the Home Front. And
now, Mr. Klingenstein is not an alumnus of Bowden.
No, he's an alumnus of Williams College, and there had been no prior contact between Mills and Klingenstein. It was a a one-off golf course game, probably the last of its kind. uh, but it created an interesting situation. Mills had, in a certain sense, laid down a gauntlet. He said, here's a problem I don't know how to solve. I'm laying it before the community. What are we going to do about this? And then he walked away from it. So the students at Bowden picked up on the article in the Claremont Review of Books and invited Tom to come to the college, presumably to debate President Mills, but President Mills wasn't interested. Tom brought me along, and in May of 2011, Tom and I addressed an audience in an auditorium at college, made the case that we thought maybe there was something missing in the curriculum, that this overwhelming slant towards the left on the faculty could have some effect on the quality of education.
And what are the dimensions of that, what you call overwhelming slant on the faculty?
Well, there are 182 faculty members, at least by one official account at Bowden. Of those, perhaps 4 or 5, 3 that we can name for sure, would consider themselves conservative.
Those 3 are out of the closet, so
Yes,
to speak?
yes. President Mills acknowledges that this is real. There's really no serious debate that there's some hidden contingent of conservative faculty members. There just aren't. The question is not whether that phenomenon exists, but what kind of effect does it have on the quality of education.
Right. And then, so this began as a political question, whether there was political diversity on the faculty, and even President Mills concedes that there isn't or isn't sufficient diversity. So he and Tom Klingenstein agreed on that premise. So where do they start to disagree? Well, and what led to your involvement on behalf of the NAS?
I think the disagreement between them starts with the evaluation of whether this disproportion in the faculty has any real effect on the quality of teaching. Not in that 2010 speech, but in other speeches, Mills has pointed to the same disparity and said it's not a problem because our liberal faculty members are fully capable of fairly representing the full spectrum of legitimate opinion in American political and social life. So yes, a disparity, no, it's not problematic. The question that Tom had raised in his Claremont Review of Books article was that it does look like it has some effect. We can look at departments like the history department and see some odd disparities here. There isn't much on the American founding. There isn't much on Abraham Lincoln. There are things that one would expect to see in a history curriculum that aren't there. There are other things that seem to be disproportionately overemphasized. A great deal of emphasis on women's history, black history, environmental history, for example. Not that those things shouldn't be there, but that when one matches them up against the things that aren't there, it appears that there is something like political bias playing a role in shaping the undergraduate curriculum of this college. Now that's a distinct difference between them. Your second question is how we became involved, the National Association of Scholars.
Okay, so you became involved as an intermediary to conduct a kind of empirical study to see the dimensions of this, of what was initially a political problem, as it radiated throughout Bowdoin College.
Well, more specifically, when Tom and I spoke to that audience of mostly Bowdoin students in May of 2011, a factual disagreement emerged. We were pointing to the fact that there are things that you don't know, that kind of Rumsfeldian
Yes, right.
formulation. But the students pushed back and quite hard, saying, no, we have everything we could possibly want here. When we asked them about the relative absence of American history, they said, not a problem, we studied that in high school. One student sort of put his chin out and said, ask me any question, I'll ace it. Now, Tom and I went away that evening sort of reckoning with this. It's an instance of, on the basis of the college catalog, we think that there's something missing, but the students say, no, everything's just fine. What can we do to settle this in a factual way? And that's at the point at which I volunteered that my organization, which among other things does fairly in-depth studies, could take this on, and maybe with 6 months we could collect enough real data to come up with a strongly evidenced account of to what degree political bias is shaping the education at the college. Now, I'm an anthropologist by training, which means, among other things, I take little pieces of thread and continue to follow them. And,
So you're familiar with subcultures.
yes, I am. And as we dug into this, a few things became clear. One is that if we were going to ask what Bowden teaches, we couldn't stop with the curriculum. The teaching that goes on in a liberal arts college is diffused through many different things: student activities, residence life, the promulgation of values from the president's office down to the dean's office, the rules and regulations in which students must abide. All of that comes together in some fashion as the effort of the college to teach something to the students: ideas, values, ways of life, habits of mind. Those things seem to me to come together in some degree as a culture. So I approached it as an anthropologist. I wanted to understand this particular tribe of people in Brunswick, Maine.
Is this a shame culture or a guilt culture?
It has elements of both. If one deviates from the idols of the tribe, there's a great deal of shame. There's guilt, I think, visited upon at least students that fit certain demographic characteristics. So,
including conservative students.
Conservative students are a very small minority in the college and have a pretty hard time, in that they do not fit with the definitions of good behavior.
And so how would the objectives of this study differ from the many other studies that have been and presumably are being conducted on higher education?
Well, the most important difference, I think, is that we aimed at a kind of comprehensiveness. The National Association of Scholars has been doing studies for 25 years. Like other organizations that do this, we tend to pick out particular problems, focus on them either comparatively or within a particular context. I got tired of hearing on every long, detailed study we did a response that went something like, "Oh, you took that out of context. You don't understand the big picture. This is just an isolated instance." Things like that, I wanted to put an answer to. I wanted to provide a case, at least one well-observed case, in which everything was back in context, that we gave due proportion to every piece, and that one couldn't say that we have cherry-picked a problem from this department or a course from over there that represents some great deviation from the prevailing norm of the campus. So we wanted to be as fair-minded, as scrupulous, as comprehensive as we could, and to make sure that everything that we observed represented the normal state of affairs at Bowden College.
And so you've produced a 372-page opus on Bowden. Did you leave anything out? Or were there questions you couldn't answer?
There were questions we couldn't answer and some things that we deliberately left out. It's not an account of every aspect of the college. We didn't inquire into buildings and grounds and things like that. And we didn't have access to things like the finances of the college beyond what they report publicly. We didn't contact the alumni. So what we stayed within the parameters of that title. What does Bowden teach?
And you had no leakers leaking you information?
No, we didn't. We were able to talk to a handful of students who would speak on the record, a somewhat larger couple handfuls of students who would talk to us but not on the record. Hardly any faculty members, but a few.
You did ask them, but they refused?
Yes, early on when we first began the study, we offered to work with the college, wrote to President Mills saying, "This is not antagonistic, we would like to make this a joint project." He didn't answer. At least he didn't answer us directly. He did send out a communication to all the students, faculty, and staff saying that we were not operating with the authorization of the college and that they were free to decline to support. Free to decline seems to have meant don't you dare go near them. So we had many instances.
It's an almost Nixonian expression.
Yes. We found people who agreed to speak to us, but then within a day or so would suddenly rethink that and without explanation decline. So the effect of that could have been to put a full stop to the study. It didn't. It turned out to work to our advantage in one way. It meant that we had to work through archival material. Mm-hmm. So Michael went to the Bowden College Library. We began to find things like long records of detailed faculty minutes, commission reports. Bowden likes to appoint commissions to study things. So in the end, we had just a great abundance of material which we could cite and document. So the voices of Bowden College, faculty, administrators, and students, are abundantly present in our report, but they're abundantly present from cited archival sources. So there can be no dispute. This isn't a case of we went in and had casual conversations with this person or that person, or we filtered things in a manner to shadow a particular view of the college. No, we relied on what the college has had to say about itself in substantial enough form that those things that were said are archived.
Did you speak to alumni or survey alumni?
No, we did not. We've been speaking to many alumni after the report has come out, but the focus was on what Bowden had to say about itself. So we didn't go out, and even finding alumni would have been difficult for us. That was one of those sources of information.
Is that right? Yeah.
Bowden was not about to share.
And since the publication of the report, have you been back to Bowden?
No, I've not been back, and I'm, of course, willing to go at any point. I'd love to have a conversation with President Mills. I'd love to be able to talk about this with faculty members and students. I think that the college has made clear that they don't take the report as intellectually serious. A week after it came out, President Mills issued a statement saying that the college had been attacked, students had been attacked, the faculty had been attacked, and that this attack was, quote, mean-spirited and personal. Mm-hmm. Now, as to personal, I've never met President Mills. I have no feelings towards him one way or the other. As to being mean-spirited, I think we approach this in a spirit of scholarship. I wanted to produce a report that was scrupulous to the furthest possible degree. So my saying as I went through this was that this is going to be dry as dust. I don't know who will want to read it, but it's just going to be facts.
Yes, and it isn't a page turner because it isn't really, there isn't an agenda on every page or running through it. It's really only in the last paragraph that you let your hair down.
I don't have much of it to
a little
let down.
bit, yes, exactly, which was not that impressive. Really. Exactly. All right, good. Thank you and congratulations on this report.
Well, thank you.